On June 22, 1941, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. More than 3 million German soldiers poured into the Soviet Union, but this wasn't just about gaining territory. It was a high-stakes gamble driven by ideology, hunger for resources, and a deep miscalculation of Soviet strength. Hitler believed this would be the final step toward total control of Europe. He imagined a vast German empire stretching from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Ural Mountains. And to get there, he believed the Soviet Union had to be destroyed, quickly and completely. At dawn on June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began with overwhelming speed and force. Using blitzkrieg tactics that had crushed Western Europe, Germany launched the largest land invasion in history. Over 3 million troops pushed across the Soviet border in a surprise attack. The invasion was divided into 3 main drives: Army Group North heading toward Leningrad, Army Group Center advancing on Moscow, and Army Group South targeting Ukraine and the Caucasus. The goal was simple: destroy the Red Army, capture Soviet leadership, and collapse the regime in just a few weeks. In the first days alone, the Luftwaffe devastated the Soviet Air Force, destroying thousands of planes, most of them still on the ground. German panzer divisions raced deep into Soviet territory, surrounding and wiping out entire armies. Soviet forces, caught off guard and poorly led, couldn't respond fast enough. By the end of summer, German forces had captured vast territories. Cities like Minsk, Smolensk, and Kiev had fallen. In multiple, massive encirclement battles, over 3 million Soviet troops were captured. Army Group North had surrounded Leningrad. Army Group Center was closing in on Moscow, and in the south, Ukraine was under German control. At this point, it looked like another quick German victory. The Red Army seemed broken. But what the Germans didn't realize was that the worst of the resistance hadn't even begun. Despite the staggering losses in the opening months, the Soviet Union didn't collapse. Instead, it held on, regrouped, and began to push back. A big part of Germany's failure was a series of critical miscalculations and the way the Soviets responded. First, Hitler completely underestimated Soviet manpower. The Germans thought they were fighting an army roughly their size. But even after losing millions, the Soviets kept putting new divisions into the field. It wasn't just manpower. They also moved their factories east of the Ural Mountains, far from the front. Within months, Soviet industry was back online, producing tanks, weapons, and aircraft. One of them, the T-34 tank, would become one of the most effective of the war. Second, German supply lines were stretched dangerously thin. The roads were poor, distances were massive, and partisan attacks constantly disrupted movement. The German army still relied heavily on horses, and that made resupply slow and unreliable. Finally, Hitler's own decisions cost him valuable time. In August 1941, instead of pushing straight for Moscow, he diverted troops south to Ukraine. While that led to big Soviet losses, it delayed the Moscow offensive, giving the Red Army just enough time to regroup and build up defenses around the capital. The weather delivered a blow the German army wasn't ready for. As autumn set in, the roads across western Russia turned to mud. This was the Rasputitsa, the infamous season where everything slows to a halt. Tanks and trucks got stuck. Supply convoys stalled, and movement across the front nearly stopped. Then winter hit. Early and brutally hard, most German troops had only light summer uniforms. They weren't prepared for sub-zero temperatures. Engines froze, weapons jammed, and thousands of soldiers suffered from frostbite. In some areas, more men were out of action from the cold than from Soviet bullets. Meanwhile, Soviet resistance was growing stronger. Word of German atrocities spread quickly. Mass shootings, entire villages wiped out, civilians murdered. Instead of breaking Soviet morale, these crimes fueled anger and a determination to fight. Stalin used this to rally the population. Soviet propaganda painted the war as a fight for survival, a defense of the motherland. It worked. Even as cities burned and casualties mounted, the Red Army held on. Behind the front lines, discipline was ruthless. But the result was clear. The Soviet Union wasn't breaking. It was preparing to strike back. In early December 1941, with German troops just 20 miles from Moscow, the Soviets struck back. On December 5th, they launched a sudden counteroffensive that caught the Germans completely off guard. After months of constant fighting, the Wehrmacht was exhausted, unprepared for the winter, and stretched far beyond its supply limits. Leading the Soviet push were fresh divisions from Siberia. These troops had been guarding the eastern border, but Soviet intelligence, thanks to the work of spy Richard Sarg, confirmed that Japan wouldn't attack from the east. That gave Stalin the confidence to move his best-trained winter units west. These Siberian soldiers were a different force. They were well equipped for freezing conditions, dressed in winter camouflage, and trained to fight in snow and ice. Their weapons worked in the cold. Their movements were fast and coordinated. The Germans couldn't hold. Their lines cracked, and for the first time they were forced into a full retreat. What had started as a lightning-fast invasion had now stalled in the snow. The chance to capture Moscow was gone, and with it, Hitler's hope for a quick victory in the east. Operation Barbarossa had failed. Operation Barbarossa was supposed to be quick. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse under one powerful blow. Its army destroyed, its people too shocked or disorganized to resist. But by the end of 1941, that plan had completely fallen apart. What began as a lightning war had turned into a slow, grinding struggle. The Germans had misjudged almost everything. The size of the Red Army, the determination of the Soviet people, the harshness of the Russian winter, and the vastness of the land they had to conquer. The idea that Soviet society would simply fall apart under pressure was dead wrong. Instead, the invasion sparked a massive wave of resistance. Where Germany expected surrender, it met fierce defiance, and the hope of winning before winter was shattered by freezing temperatures, failing supply lines, and mounting losses. By December, Hitler had suffered his first major defeat on land. German forces that once stood near the gates of Moscow were now being pushed back. The Blitzkrieg had stalled. Barbarossa didn't just fail, it changed the war. The Eastern Front became the main battleground of World War II, and it was there, in the cold and chaos of the Soviet Union, that the fate of Nazi Germany would be decided. If you believe history matters, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you soon.